Hello everyone, if you enjoy my channel, please support me with 1 like, 1 subscribe, and 1 share.
A quiet, empty house. Have you ever smiled so people would never guess your heart felt empty? Have you ever looked around a beautiful home and quietly wondered why it still didn't feel complete? My name is Emily, and if you had visited my house in the United States 1 year ago, you probably would have thought I had everything. A loving husband. 2 wonderful children. A peaceful neighborhood. A warm kitchen that always smelled like fresh coffee. But behind every happy family photo was a secret that even my closest friends didn't know. One unexpected little girl would soon change every plan we had ever made. And one sentence she whispered on the first night almost broke my heart forever. I never imagined I would tell this story to strangers, but maybe you are here because you are learning English. Or maybe you simply enjoy real stories about life, love, and family. Either way, I'm happy you found this video. My English is slow and simple because I want you to understand every word. So take a deep breath, relax, and let's begin together. I live in a quiet American suburb where mornings begin with birds singing outside my bedroom window and school buses stopping at the same corner every weekday. Life here is comfortable. My husband leaves for work after breakfast. My son rushes out the door because he is always late. My teenage daughter somehow spends 20 minutes choosing 1 pair of shoes. Everything looks ordinary. Everything feels safe. But sometimes, the safest life hides the deepest silence. Every afternoon, after everyone left the house, I would wash the dishes, fold the laundry, water my flowers, and then, nothing. The house became unbelievably quiet. Too quiet. I often stood in the hallway listening to the sound of my own footsteps. It was strange. We were a family of 4, yet the house often felt much bigger than our happiness. One day, while cleaning an old closet, I found a small cardboard box filled with children's drawings. Some belonged to my son. Some belonged to my daughter. Tiny stick figures. Crooked hearts. Finger paintings covered in bright colors. I smiled at every picture until I noticed something unexpected. There was an empty sheet of white paper at the bottom. I don't know why, but I couldn't stop staring at it. It looked like a page waiting for someone who had never arrived. That evening, I asked my husband a question I had kept inside for years. What if our family isn't finished? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the kitchen window for a long time. Then he quietly asked, "Are you thinking about adoption again?" Again. That single word surprised me. Apparently, I wasn't the only one carrying the same secret. For years, both of us had hidden that dream because we thought the other person wasn't interested. Isn't that funny? Sometimes the biggest walls inside a marriage are built from silence instead of disagreement. During the following weeks, we talked every night after the kids went to bed. We read stories about adoption in America. We learned about children waiting for families. We cried over stories with happy endings and heartbreaking endings. Some nights, we closed the laptop without saying a word because the emotions felt too heavy. At the same time, something unexpected happened. My English practice changed. Instead of reading random sentences, I began reading real stories written by adoptive parents. The vocabulary was simple but meaningful. Words like hope, trust, family, kindness, and belong suddenly felt much more powerful than grammar exercises. I realized language becomes unforgettable when it carries real emotions. Science actually supports this idea. Researchers have found that emotional experiences help the brain remember information more effectively. When we connect feelings with words, learning becomes deeper and more natural. Looking back, I wasn't just improving my English. I was quietly preparing my heart for a conversation I didn't even know was coming. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The woman from the adoption agency spoke gently. "We think we've found a little girl who might be a wonderful match for your family." I stopped breathing. She emailed us one photograph. Just one. A tiny girl with messy brown hair, oversized blue sneakers, and the saddest eyes I had ever seen. But it wasn't her face that kept me awake that entire night. It was the single handwritten sentence on the back of her file. And after I read those 9 simple words, I knew our lives would never be the same. One small photograph. Can a single photograph change your future in less than 1 minute? I used to think people only said things like that in movies. I was wrong. The moment I opened that email, I forgot about my coffee, my grocery list, and even the bread burning in the oven. My eyes stayed on one little girl whose quiet expression seemed to ask a question no child should ever have to ask: will someone choose me? I had no idea that before the week ended, my husband and I would make a decision that would completely rewrite the story of our family. I opened the attachment again and again. The picture was simple. No perfect smile. No fancy clothes. No colorful background. She wore an oversized yellow sweater, blue sneakers that looked at least one size too big, and her brown hair had been tied back in a hurry. Most people would probably notice her serious face first. I noticed her hands. She was holding a small stuffed rabbit so tightly that her little fingers looked almost white. It felt as if she believed that toy was the only thing in the world she could truly trust. Then I turned to the notes attached to her profile. There were only a few pages. She loved drawing. She liked rainy days. She enjoyed listening to bedtime stories. She was shy around new people. She smiled more when someone read slowly to her. That last sentence made me stop reading. I smiled without realizing it. Reading slowly. That had become part of my own life, too. Every evening, I practiced slow English by reading short stories aloud. I always believed slow reading helped people understand not only words but also emotions. Maybe that was why this little sentence touched me so deeply. I called my husband at work. "I think you need to see this." He came home earlier than usual. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. We simply looked at her picture together. Finally, he whispered, "She looks lonely." I answered before I even thought about it. "She looks brave." Maybe we were both right. Over the next few days, we learned more about her. The social worker explained that she wasn't loud or difficult. She simply watched people carefully before deciding whether they were safe. Children who have experienced uncertainty often become excellent observers. Psychologists explain that many children naturally scan faces, voices, and body language when they are trying to understand whether they can trust someone. It isn't because they are unfriendly. It is because their hearts have learned to be careful. That explanation stayed with me. Instead of wondering whether she would like us, I started wondering something much more important. Would she ever believe that we would stay? That night, my daughter walked into the living room and saw the photograph lying on the coffee table. "Is that her?" she asked softly. I nodded. She picked up the picture very carefully, almost as if it might break. I hope she likes pancakes, she said with a nervous smile. My son laughed. If she doesn't, I'll make pizza. For the first time in months, our family wasn't talking about schedules, homework, or weekend plans. We were talking about making room for someone we had never even met. The house already felt different. Hope has a strange way of changing a room before anything actually changes. As I continued practicing English, I noticed something unexpected. I kept repeating one simple word from her profile. Belong. I looked it up again, even though I already knew its meaning. To belong means to feel accepted. To feel safe. To know you have a place where people are waiting for you. Sometimes one English word can carry an entire life inside it. The following Friday, the adoption agency called again. The woman sounded cheerful. Everything is moving faster than expected, she said. My heart started racing. She asked if we would like to meet the little girl in person the following week. I looked across the room at my husband. He didn't hesitate. He simply reached for my hand. I told the social worker, yes. After hanging up, I felt excited and terrified. What if she didn't smile? What if she refused to talk to us? What if she looked at us and decided we could never become her family? I barely slept that night. But none of those fears prepared me for what actually happened. Because when we finally met her for the very first time, she didn't say, hello. She didn't ask our names. Instead, she looked directly into my eyes and asked one heartbreaking question that instantly filled the room with silence. Our first meeting. What would you do if a little child looked into your eyes and asked a question so heartbreaking that every answer suddenly felt wrong? I had imagined our first meeting hundreds of times. In every version, she smiled a little. Maybe she waved. Maybe she hid behind the social worker for a few minutes. Reality was nothing like that. The first words she ever spoke to me were so quiet that I almost missed them, yet they echoed inside my heart for days. At that moment, I realized we were not simply meeting a little girl. We were meeting every fear she had ever carried. The meeting took place on a bright spring morning in a family center just outside our town. The building looked cheerful, with colorful paintings on the walls and shelves full of books and toys. Children were laughing somewhere down the hallway. Everything was designed to feel safe. Still, my hands were shaking as I held a small gift bag with a picture book and a soft teddy bear inside. My husband squeezed my hand before we walked through the door. Neither of us spoke. We were both smiling, but our smiles were hiding nervous hearts. The social worker welcomed us with a gentle voice. She's already here, she whispered. My heart immediately began beating faster. When I stepped into the room, I saw her sitting alone at a tiny wooden table. She was carefully drawing a small house with a blue crayon. She didn't look up when we entered. She kept coloring the roof, slowly and carefully. As if finishing that picture was more important than meeting two strangers who might change her life forever. The social worker softly called her name. She finally looked up. Her eyes met mine. Then she quietly asked, "Are you staying? Or are you leaving too?" The room became completely silent. No one moved. No one knew what to say. I felt tears gathering before I could stop them. That wasn't a question a child should have to ask. It wasn't curiosity. It was experience. I slowly knelt down so my eyes were level with hers. "I came to meet you," I answered gently. "And today, I'm staying as long as you'll let me." She didn't smile. She simply watched my face very carefully. Later, I learned that psychologists often explain trust as something built through repeated safe experiences, not beautiful promises. Children who have experienced loss usually believe actions much more than words. That thought stayed with me for the rest of the day. I knew I couldn't ask her to trust me in one meeting. I could only begin showing her that I was someone who would keep coming back. After a few quiet minutes, I noticed the drawing on her table. "It's a beautiful house," I said. She looked down at the paper. "It needs one more window," she whispered. "Why?" "So everyone can see each other." Her answer surprised me. Even at her young age, she believed families should never lose sight of one another. We spent the next hour reading together. I opened the picture book I had brought and began reading slowly, one sentence at a time. She didn't interrupt. She listened carefully to every word. Occasionally she repeated a short sentence after me. Her pronunciation wasn't perfect, but neither was mine when I first practiced speaking slowly every day. That was the wonderful thing about language. Nobody needed to sound perfect to be understood. We simply needed patience. If you're learning English with this story, here's something I discovered that day. Reading aloud slowly helps your brain connect sounds, emotions, and meaning at the same time. It isn't about reading fast. It's about understanding deeply. Somehow, while reading to her, I forgot I was practicing English. I was simply sharing a peaceful moment. Before we left, she surprised everyone. She walked over to my husband. Without saying a word, she handed him the drawing of the little blue house. "It has room now," she said. My husband smiled so warmly that I thought my heart might burst. As we drove home, none of us spoke for several minutes. The drawing rested quietly on my lap. For the first time, I truly believed she might become our daughter. Then my phone rang. It was the social worker. Her voice sounded different this time. "There is something important about her past that we haven't discussed yet," she said carefully. "Before you make your final decision, there's one truth you absolutely need to know." I held my breath. Because whatever she was about to tell us would either bring our future even closer, or change everything we thought we knew. Learning to be family. Have you ever discovered that the biggest secret wasn't about someone's past, but about your own heart? I expected the social worker's phone call to reveal something frightening about the little girl. Instead, what she shared forced my husband and me to ask a much harder question. Were we ready to love a child who might not trust us for a very long time? That evening changed everything. We realized adoption was never about rescuing a child. It was about becoming the kind of family that would never stop showing up, even on the hardest days. The social worker spoke gently, choosing every word with care. "She has moved through several temporary homes," she explained. None of the families were cruel. Life simply changed. Different situations. Different circumstances. But from her perspective, every goodbye felt the same. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, her question from our first meeting made perfect sense. "Are you staying, or are you leaving too?" She wasn't asking because she was afraid of us. She was asking because experience had taught her that adults often disappear. When I hung up the phone, I found my husband quietly sitting on our back porch. The evening sky was turning orange, and our neighborhood was unusually peaceful. Children were riding bicycles. Someone nearby was grilling hamburgers. Everything looked so ordinary, Yet our lives were standing at an extraordinary crossroads. "I've been thinking," he said softly. "So have I. What if she never calls us Mom and Dad?" I smiled sadly. "Then we'll keep loving her anyway." He nodded. "What if she pushes us away?" "We'll stay." "What if it takes years?" "We'll stay." That became our promise. Not because we were confident. Because love sometimes begins with a decision before it becomes a feeling. Over the next several weeks, we attended parenting sessions and met with counselors who specialized in helping adoptive families. One psychologist shared something I will never forget. She said that children who have experienced repeated loss often test relationships, not because they want them to fail, but because they desperately hope someone will finally prove that they won't leave. Research in developmental psychology supports this idea. Consistent routines, calm responses, and dependable care gradually help children rebuild a sense of emotional safety. Hearing that changed the way I imagined our future. We didn't need to become perfect parents. We needed to become predictable parents. That word stayed with me. Predictable. At first it sounded boring. Then I realized predictable meant breakfast every morning. A bedtime story every night. A hug after a difficult day. The same loving voice saying, "Good morning," again and again. Sometimes healing grows quietly through ordinary moments. As I continued practicing English, I noticed another beautiful connection. I started reading simple family stories aloud every evening. One sentence became my favorite. "Home is where love stays." The grammar was easy. The meaning was unforgettable. When you learn English through emotions instead of memorizing isolated vocabulary, your brain naturally remembers both the words and the feeling behind them. That simple sentence slowly became part of my own heart. A few days later, we invited our children into the living room. They already knew we were thinking about adoption, but now it was time for an honest family conversation. My daughter looked at me first. "Is she scared?" "Yes," I answered truthfully. My son quietly asked, "Can I still be her big brother even if she doesn't like me at first?" I reached over and squeezed his hand. "That's exactly when she'll need a big brother the most." He smiled. "I'll wait." Children sometimes understand love much better than adults. The following weekend, we prepared a bedroom that had been empty for years. We painted the walls a soft cream color. My daughter carefully arranged books on a small shelf. My son placed a stuffed dinosaur beside a new teddy bear. Then something unexpected happened. I found the blank piece of paper from the old cardboard box, the one I had discovered weeks earlier beneath my children's drawings. Without saying anything, I taped it onto the bedroom wall. My husband looked at me curiously. "Why leave it blank?" I smiled. "Because her story hasn't been written yet." Late that night, just before I went to bed, my phone buzzed with a new message from the social worker. The court had approved the next step. If everything went according to schedule, the little girl would visit our home for the very first time the following Saturday. I felt equal parts excitement and fear. I wondered whether she would like her new room, whether she would sleep peacefully, whether she would laugh. But I had no idea that before the sun set on her very first day in our house, she would quietly walk into the kitchen, hold something behind her back, and make a shocking confession that left every member of our family completely speechless. Love meets challenges. What if the first real sign that a child trusts you isn't a hug, but a heartbreaking confession? I thought our biggest challenge would be helping our little girl feel comfortable in our home. I was completely wrong. The hardest moments arrived when everything looked perfectly normal. One quiet Saturday evening in our kitchen, she held something behind her back, looked at me with frightened eyes, and whispered 7 words that instantly shattered my heart. Please don't send me away because of this. I wasn't prepared for what she slowly revealed next. The house had never sounded so alive. My son was teaching our dog a new trick in the backyard. My daughter was playing soft music while decorating cookies. My husband was making homemade pizza, proudly insisting that extra cheese solved every problem in life. For a few beautiful hours, it almost felt as though our little girl had always belonged here. She didn't speak much. Instead, she quietly watched everyone. She noticed who laughed first, who cleaned the dishes, who said thank you, who remembered to ask if she wanted more juice. Children often notice details adults completely miss. Every smile, every sigh, every promise, every silence. That evening, I walked into the kitchen to refill my tea when I saw her standing near the refrigerator. She quickly hid one hand behind her back. Her shoulders became tense. She wouldn't look at me. I smiled gently. "What are you hiding, sweetheart?" Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Very slowly, she brought her hand forward. She was holding a small apple. Nothing more. Just one ordinary apple. Then she whispered the words I will never forget. "Please don't send me away because of this." I felt frozen. Why would we send you away for an apple? She looked down at the floor. In another house. I got hungry before dinner. She stopped speaking. After a long silence, she continued. They said I wasn't allowed. No child should ever believe that eating an apple could cost them a family. I knelt beside her and gently held both of her hands. You never have to hide food here. She looked confused. Really? I nodded. If you're hungry, you tell me. She stared at me for several seconds, almost waiting for me to change my mind. Instead, I washed the apple, sliced it into small pieces, and placed it on her favorite blue plate. Then I cut another apple for myself. We sat together at the kitchen table eating quietly. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with big speeches. Sometimes it begins with sharing fruit. Later that night, our family therapist explained something that helped us understand her behavior. Many children who have experienced uncertainty around food, routines, or caregivers develop protective habits. They may hide snacks, worry about running out, or become anxious over ordinary situations. Research in child psychology shows these behaviors are often survival responses, not signs of dishonesty. The goal isn't punishment. The goal is helping the child experience consistent safety until the fear slowly disappears. That conversation changed the way I saw every small moment. She wasn't testing us. She was protecting herself. And little by little, she was learning she no longer had to. Around the same time, our English practice became something special. Every evening after dinner, we read one short story together. I always chose simple words so everyone could follow along. One night the sentence was, "You are safe with us." She repeated it quietly. Then she asked me what safe meant. I smiled. "It means nobody here wants to hurt you." She repeated the sentence again. Slower this time. "You are safe with us." I could hear her practicing pronunciation. But somehow, it felt as if she was practicing belief even more than English. Over the next few weeks, small miracles appeared everywhere. She laughed when our dog chased butterflies. She started helping my husband make pancakes every Sunday morning. She asked my daughter to braid her hair before school. One afternoon, I even caught her singing softly while coloring at the dining table. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt wonderfully, beautifully noisy. I thought the hardest part was finally behind us. Then one afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call from her elementary school. There wasn't an emergency, the teacher assured me. But something happened today that you should probably hear in person. My heart immediately began racing again. Had someone been mean to her? Had she gotten hurt? Or had she done something completely unexpected? When I arrived at the school office, the teacher smiled gently and handed me a folded piece of paper. "It isn't what she did," she whispered. "It's what she wrote." I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. The very first sentence stole my breath. And before I reached the final line, I realized our little girl had been carrying one incredible secret inside her heart. A secret she had never shared with anyone until that day. The little girl changed us. Have you ever opened a piece of paper expecting a simple school assignment? Only to discover words that changed your entire life? I thought the teacher wanted to discuss grades or classroom behavior. Instead, she quietly handed me a folded sheet with my little girl's handwriting. The room suddenly felt smaller. My heart beat louder with every second. By the time I finished reading the first paragraph, tears blurred every word on the page. I had believed we were teaching her how to feel loved. The truth was far more surprising. Without realizing it, she had already begun teaching us how to love. The paper was part of a classroom activity called My Safe Place. Every student had been asked to write a few simple sentences about where they felt happiest. Some children wrote about the beach. Others wrote about their grandparents or favorite parks. My little girl chose something completely different. In her careful handwriting, she wrote, "My safe place is my kitchen." I smiled. Then I kept reading. Because when I wake up, someone always says good morning. When I come home from school, someone always asks how my day was. When I feel scared, someone always waits for my answer instead of getting angry. I had to stop for a moment. The teacher quietly passed me a tissue. "There is one more sentence," she whispered. I looked back at the page. The final line simply said, "I don't count the days anymore because I think they will still be here tomorrow." I couldn't hold back my tears. That single sentence explained everything. For months, she had secretly been counting the days. Not until her birthday. Not until Christmas. Not until summer vacation. She had been counting the days until another goodbye. And now, she had finally stopped. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about attachment and trust. Child development experts often explain that emotional security grows through thousands of small, dependable experiences rather than one dramatic event. A bedtime story. A predictable dinner. A gentle hug after a nightmare. The brain slowly begins replacing fear with expectation. Instead of asking, "Will they leave?" it quietly starts believing, "They'll probably still be here tomorrow." That realization felt like the greatest gift anyone had ever given me. That evening, I didn't mention the paper. Instead, I made her favorite tomato soup with grilled cheese sandwiches. My husband told one of his terrible jokes that made everyone groan. My son accidentally dropped his spoon, making our dog race across the kitchen like it had won the lottery. My daughter laughed so hard that milk almost came out of her nose. And then something happened that no one expected. Our little girl laughed. Not a polite smile. Not a tiny giggle. A real, joyful laugh that filled the entire room. For a few beautiful seconds, nobody spoke. We simply listened. Sometimes the happiest sound in a home isn't music. It's the moment someone finally forgets to be afraid. Later that night, we continued our slow English reading before bedtime. She chose the book herself and pointed to one sentence. Love grows little by little. She looked at me. What does grow mean? I smiled. It means something becomes bigger with time. She nodded thoughtfully. Like flowers? Yes. She thought again. And like families? I felt my eyes filling with tears. Exactly like families. That became our favorite English sentence for weeks. Simple words. Deep meaning. I noticed she was becoming more confident every day. She started reading aloud with clearer pronunciation. She even corrected my husband one evening when he skipped a word by accident. We all laughed, and for the first time, she laughed louder than anyone else. Life finally felt peaceful. Too peaceful. Because just when we believed our family had settled into its new rhythm, an unexpected letter arrived in our mailbox. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't school paperwork. It came from someone connected to her past. My hands began trembling before I even opened the envelope. My husband looked at me silently. Neither of us recognized the sender's name. I slowly unfolded the letter. The first sentence made my heart stop. Someone wanted to meet her. After everything we had built together. After every promise. After every bedtime story. I suddenly found myself facing the one question I had feared from the very beginning. Would opening that door strengthen our family? Or risk breaking her heart all over again? New traditions together. What if the letter I feared would destroy our family became the reason we finally understood what family truly means? I barely slept after opening that envelope. My imagination created 100 terrible endings before sunrise. Would someone try to take our little girl away? Would old memories reopen wounds that had just begun to heal? My heart was filled with questions, but hers was filled with quiet hope. What happened next surprised every one of us, and it became the beginning of a tradition that still lives in our home today. The next morning, my husband and I met with the social worker before making any decisions. She already knew about the letter. There is no emergency, she reassured us. No one is trying to change the adoption. The person simply wants to send a message. I finally took a deep breath. The sender was an elderly volunteer who had spent time reading books to our little girl during one difficult season of her life. Before moving to another state, she had written one final letter. Hoping it would eventually reach the child she had always believed would find a loving family. The social worker looked at me. Would you like to read it together with her? I nodded. That evening, after dinner, we gathered in the living room. The fireplace glowed softly, even though the weather outside was cool rather than cold. Our dog curled up beside the couch as if he already sensed this was an important moment. I slowly unfolded the letter. The handwriting was neat and gentle. It began with simple words. Dear sweet girl, if you are reading this, I hope someone finally keeps every promise they made to you. Our little girl quietly listened without interrupting. I hope your mornings begin with laughter. I hope someone remembers your favorite breakfast. I hope you never wonder again whether you belong. I looked up. She wasn't crying. She was smiling. A peaceful, quiet smile. When I finished reading, she hugged the letter against her chest. Then she asked something that made every adult in the room pause. Can we write back even if she never reads it? I smiled through tears. Of course. That night, we all sat around the dining table with paper, colored pencils, and markers. Instead of writing only one letter, everyone wrote one. My son drew our family standing in front of our house. My daughter decorated the page with tiny hearts and flowers. My husband simply wrote, "Thank you for believing she deserved love." When it was my turn, I realized I couldn't find enough words. Finally, I wrote only one sentence. She is home. Our little girl read every letter slowly. Then she added her own. The spelling wasn't perfect. The grammar wasn't perfect. But the meaning was. I smile now every day. Sometimes imperfect English carries perfect emotions. In fact, language teachers often explain that confidence grows faster than fluency when learners focus on communication instead of perfection. That became part of our family routine. Every Sunday evening, we spent 20 minutes reading short English stories aloud together. Nobody corrected every mistake. We celebrated every brave attempt instead. Our favorite word became together. Not because it was difficult. Because it described everything we wanted our family to become. Weeks passed, and life continued filling our home with ordinary miracles. Friday movie nights. Saturday pancake breakfasts. Sunday walks through the neighborhood park where the trees changed colors with each season. Autumn arrived, covering sidewalks with bright red and golden leaves. Our little girl loved jumping into leaf piles more than any of us. One afternoon she laughed so hard that even strangers walking by couldn't help smiling. That's when I realized something beautiful. She no longer looked around to see whether people were watching her. She simply enjoyed being a child. Healing had quietly become happiness. One evening before Thanksgiving, we decided to begin a new family tradition. Everyone would write one thing they were thankful for and place it inside a glass jar. At the end of the year, we would read every note together. My son wrote, "I'm thankful for my sisters." My daughter wrote, "I'm thankful our house is louder now." My husband smiled as he folded his paper. When it was our little girl's turn, she thought for a long time. Then she carefully wrote just 4 words. Nobody left this year. The room became completely silent. Even now, remembering those words brings tears to my eyes. We hugged her tightly. She hugged us back without hesitation. For the first time, the hug felt completely natural. Not cautious. Not uncertain. Simply family. I believed we had finally reached the happiest chapter of our story. But life has a strange habit of testing happiness just when it feels safest. Only 3 days before Christmas, our little girl quietly disappeared from the living room. At first, we thought she had gone upstairs. Then we checked every bedroom. The backyard. The garage. She was nowhere. Just as panic began spreading through our home, I noticed something lying on the kitchen table. It was another handwritten note. This one was addressed to me. And after reading the very first line, I realized she had gone somewhere none of us had expected. Finding confidence again. What if the scariest moment of our family's journey wasn't the day we met our daughter, but the 5 minutes when we couldn't find her? My heart was pounding so hard that I could barely breathe. The note she left on the kitchen table contained only one short sentence, yet it sent 1,000 frightening thoughts racing through my mind. Every fear she had worked so hard to overcome suddenly came rushing back into mine. I thought I understood what panic felt like before that day. I didn't. Because when someone you love disappears, even for a moment, time no longer moves the same way. The note was written in careful, uneven handwriting. Mom, please don't worry. I need to do something important. That was all. No explanation. No destination. No clue. I looked at my husband, and I could see the fear in his eyes before he even spoke. Call her name. Within seconds, our peaceful house became a place filled with hurried footsteps. My son searched upstairs. My daughter checked the backyard. My husband walked quickly toward the neighborhood park. I stayed by the front door, hoping I would see a small figure running back toward me. Nothing. The silence felt unbearable. Then my phone rang. It was one of our neighbors. I think your little girl is here, she said gently. Don't panic. She's safe. Before she finished speaking, I was already running. 2 streets away, our neighbor was standing outside her small white house. Beside her stood our little girl. She wasn't crying. She wasn't frightened. She was holding a small plate covered with aluminum foil. The moment she saw me, she smiled nervously. I'm sorry, Mom. I dropped to my knees and hugged her as tightly as I could. I thought something had happened. She looked embarrassed. I wanted to surprise Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. Wilson was an elderly widow who lived alone. A few weeks earlier, she had mentioned that Christmas reminded her how quiet her house had become since losing her husband. Our little girl remembered. Without telling anyone, she had quietly taken 2 freshly baked cookies from our kitchen and walked to her house. I didn't want her to be lonely, she whispered. Mrs. Wilson wiped away tears. So she knocked on my door and said, nobody should eat Christmas cookies alone. For several seconds, nobody spoke. I realized something extraordinary. The little girl who had once feared every goodbye had become the person making sure someone else didn't feel alone. Healing had turned into kindness. That evening, as we walked home together beneath sparkling Christmas lights, I held her hand a little tighter than usual. I'm proud of you, I told her. She looked up at me. You weren't mad? I smiled. I was scared because I love you. She thought quietly for a moment. That's different. Yes, I answered. It is. Family therapists often explain that children begin developing true confidence when they experience both freedom and dependable support. Knowing someone will protect them gives children the courage to care for others. Looking back, I realized we weren't simply watching her become more secure. We were watching her become herself. That night, before bedtime, we continued our slow English reading tradition. She chose today's sentence. Kindness comes back. She read it slowly. Then she asked me, what does comes back mean? It means when you give something good to others, goodness often returns to you in unexpected ways. She smiled. So, kindness travels? I laughed softly. Yes. And today, she said proudly, it visited Mrs. Wilson. Her English was improving every week. More importantly, so was her confidence. She no longer whispered every answer. She volunteered to read aloud. She even raised her hand in class more often, according to her teacher. Research on language learning suggests that confidence lowers anxiety, making it easier for the brain to process and remember new vocabulary. I saw that truth every evening at our dining room table. The more loved she felt, the more willing she became to speak, even when she wasn't completely sure of every word. Winter slowly passed. Spring arrived. Flowers bloomed across our neighborhood. Life finally felt wonderfully ordinary. One Saturday afternoon, we decided to organize old family photos into albums. As everyone laughed over funny pictures, our little girl quietly disappeared into her bedroom. A few minutes later, she returned carrying something hidden behind her back. I made something, she said shyly. She handed me a homemade picture frame. Inside wasn't a recent family photo. It was the very first picture the adoption agency had ever sent us, the one with the oversized yellow sweater, messy brown hair, and the frightened little girl holding a stuffed rabbit. But she had written one new sentence beneath the photograph. When I read those words, tears instantly filled my eyes. Not because they were sad. Because they proved just how far she had come. Then she looked at me with a mysterious smile and said, "Mom, tomorrow, I have one more surprise." I laughed. "Another surprise?" She nodded. "It's the biggest one yet." I had no idea that the following day, in front of our entire family, she would say 3 simple words I had dreamed of hearing since the moment we first met, and those words would change our lives forever. A home filled with laughter. Have you ever waited so long to hear 3 simple words that you almost convinced yourself they would never come? I told myself not to expect anything. Love cannot be rushed. Trust cannot be demanded. Children heal at their own pace. Still, when our little girl smiled that mysterious smile and promised she had one final surprise, I secretly wondered if this ordinary Sunday would become the day I remembered for the rest of my life. I never imagined the greatest gift would arrive when nobody was trying to create a perfect moment. Sunday mornings had become my favorite part of the week. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows while the smell of pancakes filled the house. My husband flipped pancakes with far too much confidence. My son insisted he could make the perfect scrambled eggs. And my daughter was carefully decorating fresh strawberries for the table. Our dog wandered hopefully from one person to another, convinced someone would accidentally drop breakfast. Our little girl was unusually quiet. Not nervous. Just thoughtful. Every few minutes she looked toward the hallway, almost as if she were waiting for the right moment. After breakfast, she disappeared upstairs without saying a word. 5 minutes later she returned carrying a small blue notebook. "I made this for our family," she said softly. She handed it to me. The cover read, "Our Story." Inside were drawings from the day we first met. There was the little wooden table where she had colored the blue house. There was our dog chasing butterflies. There were pancakes, bedtime stories, autumn leaves, Christmas cookies. And even the funny family game nights where my husband always claimed he wasn't competitive while trying very hard to win. Every page showed another memory. Every drawing became brighter. Every smile became bigger. It felt like watching fear slowly disappear through colored pencils. Near the end of the notebook, one page caught my attention. It showed our family standing in front of our house. Above each person she had carefully written a name. My son. My daughter. Dad. Then I looked at the final name. Above my drawing she had written only one word. Mom. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I looked up at her. You wrote. Mom. She nodded shyly. I wanted to say it before. She paused. I just needed to believe it first. No birthday present. No holiday gift. No expensive surprise. Nothing in my entire life had ever meant more than that one word. My husband quietly wrapped his arm around my shoulders while my daughter wiped away tears without even trying to hide them. Even my son, who usually joked about everything, looked suspiciously emotional. Then our little girl walked over and hugged me. Not because someone suggested it. Not because she felt expected to. She simply wanted to. That hug lasted only a few seconds. Yet somehow it healed months of silent worries I had never spoken aloud. Later that afternoon, we sat together on the front porch watching children ride bicycles through our neighborhood. She leaned against my shoulder. Mom? Yes? I don't feel different anymore. What do you mean? I don't feel like the adopted kid. I smiled. That's because you're not. She looked confused. What am I? I kissed the top of her head. You're simply our daughter. Sometimes identity changes quietly. Not through legal papers. Not through ceremonies. But through ordinary conversations that finally sound completely natural. That evening we continued our slow English reading tradition. The sentence for the day was wonderfully simple. Family is built with love. She read every word clearly. Then she smiled. I know this one. What does it mean? I asked. It means people stay because they want to. I laughed softly. You've become a wonderful English student. She grinned. I had wonderful teachers. Research on language learning consistently shows that positive emotions strengthen long-term memory. Looking around our living room, I realized our English practice had never been only about vocabulary or pronunciation. Every new word had become connected to laughter, bedtime stories, shared meals, and quiet conversations. Learning had become part of loving. As evening arrived, we gathered around the fireplace to watch old family videos. The first clip showed the shy little girl who could barely look at the camera. The newest clip showed the same child dancing in the kitchen with our dog while everyone laughed. The difference was almost impossible to believe. Then my husband quietly looked at me. I think someone has one more surprise. I turned toward our little girl. She reached into her notebook and pulled out a folded envelope. It's for you and Dad, she whispered. We're supposed to open it tomorrow morning. I smiled. Can you give us one little hint? She giggled. If you read it, you'll understand why this is the happiest family I've ever dreamed about. I carefully placed the envelope on the mantel above the fireplace. None of us opened it that night. None of us knew that inside was a message so beautiful, so unexpected, that it would become the perfect ending to the greatest chapter of our lives, and remind us that sometimes the smallest hearts leave the biggest. Footprints forever. The greatest gift. What if the happiest ending of our story wasn't hidden inside a legal document, a family photograph, or even the first time she called me Mom? What if it was waiting inside one small envelope that almost stayed unopened forever? The next morning, I picked it up with trembling hands, expecting a simple thank you note from a little girl. Instead, I found words so honest that they stopped time inside our kitchen. Before I finished reading, everyone around the table was crying, smiling, and laughing at the same time. That was the exact moment I realized she hadn't simply joined our family. She had quietly rebuilt it from the inside out. The sun was shining through the kitchen windows as everyone gathered around the breakfast table. Pancakes were already getting cold because nobody wanted to begin eating before opening the envelope. Our little girl watched us with nervous excitement. "Open it," she whispered. I carefully unfolded the letter. The handwriting was steadier now than it had been months earlier. She had grown. Not only in height, but in confidence. The first sentence made me smile immediately. "Dear Mom and Dad." This time, she didn't hesitate before writing those words. She continued. "Before I met you, I thought families were places people visited for a little while. I didn't know families could stay forever." I paused for a moment. My husband quietly reached for my hand. She had written several short paragraphs. Simple English. Simple sentences. Yet every word carried enormous meaning. When I first came here, I counted every day because I was afraid someone would tell me to pack my things again. Then one morning I forgot to count. I think that was the first day I started believing I was home. The room became completely silent. Even our dog rested quietly beside the table, as though he somehow understood this moment mattered. Then I reached the final paragraph. "Thank you for waiting when I was quiet. Thank you for smiling when I was scared. Thank you for staying when I thought everyone leaves. You didn't only adopt me. You also gave me a future where I can dream without being afraid." I couldn't read another word. Tears blurred the page. Our little girl slowly walked over and wrapped her arms around me. "I love you, Mom." There it was. 3 words. 3 beautifully ordinary words. Yet after everything we had shared together, they felt extraordinary. "I love you too," I whispered. "And I always will." My husband hugged both of us. Soon my son joined. Then my daughter. Within seconds, all 5 of us were standing together in one enormous family hug, laughing through tears. That morning, I realized something I had never fully understood before. Families are not created by perfect beginnings. They are built by ordinary people choosing one another every single day. Later that afternoon, we took a walk through our neighborhood park. Spring flowers were blooming beside the sidewalks, children were flying colorful kites, and families were enjoying picnics under the warm American sunshine. Our little girl ran ahead with her brother and sister, laughing louder than the wind. I watched them disappear around a corner. For the first time, I wasn't worried. I wasn't wondering whether she felt safe. I already knew. Child psychologists often explain that a secure attachment allows children to explore the world with confidence because they know they have a safe place to return. Looking at her running freely across the grass, I understood exactly what those studies meant. Home had become her safe place. And somehow, she had become ours. That evening, before bedtime, we kept one final tradition. We opened our favorite English storybook. She looked at me and smiled. "Can I read tonight?" "Of course." Slowly and confidently, she read the final sentence. "Love makes a family." Her pronunciation was clear. Her voice was calm. When she finished, she closed the book and looked at me. I know what every word means now. I smiled. So do I. If you're learning English with me today, I hope you remember something more important than vocabulary. Words become unforgettable when they are connected to real emotions. Read slowly. Listen carefully. Speak bravely. You don't have to sound perfect. Every sentence you practice is another step toward confidence. Just as every small act of kindness is another step toward building stronger relationships. Looking back, people sometimes ask me the same question. How did adopting a little girl change your family? I always smile before answering. She taught us that love is not measured by blood, time, or perfection. Love is measured by who stays. And sometimes, the smallest person in a family carries the biggest heart. If this story touched your heart, I hope you'll carry its message with you today. Someone in your life may simply need your patience, your kindness, or your willingness to stay. Those small choices can change a life more than you ever imagine. That's all for today. I'll make many more stories like this in the future. Please subscribe so you don't miss the next one.